We'll get moving. So welcome back, all my Zoom yogis. Hi, how do you feel? How did that practice feel for you? Someone here said it was their favorite practice this semester. Hopefully it feels a little more used to it at this point. Did anyone feel like that was super challenging, too hard, or good, medium, whatever? Okay, here, okay. So here, yoga practice, kind of observe, and now we'll just kind of go over a little bit more like philosophy and that kind of thing. I don't think I said it on Zoom or recorded, so I'll just share. Last day of class is Thursday, obviously, and I'll ask you to turn in your mindfulness journals, and you'll have like one final assignment from me that's maybe like a one-page reflection of what you've learned, maybe what was unexpected, any like personal insights, and then any feedback you have for me as an instructor. So you'll have like mindfulness journals, that assignment. I'll post all this to Moodle. And then you have 2 reading assignments. Most of you've had lots of time to do. So a couple are from the text, just a couple pages. And then I posted a document to Moodle about kind of the history of yoga, and we'll actually kind of go over that a little bit today. So you can lie down if you can pay attention and lie down. Or you can kind of sit up tall, sit well. And I just want to kind of go over what yoga means again, since this is your kind of like intro to yoga class. Maybe some of you will never do yoga again. So the word yoga means to yoke or union or connection. That's kind of like the most popular definition of yoga. It also means samadhi, which is the 8th limb in the 8 limb path of yoga, which is kind of like enlightenment or absorption or presence. You might say like samadhi is the goal of yoga, to like get to this like blissful place, enlightenment. The noun yoga derives from the verbal root yuj, which means to join. So that has come up with like lots of metaphors and thinking about joining the body, the breath, and the mind, joining the breath and the movement, the body and the person with the divine, or kind of connecting everyone to join. Another definition of yoga is from the 2nd sutra, which is yoga chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga or union is the taming of the mental activities, the stilling of the fluctuation of the mind. So yoga is kind of yoking and quieting the thoughts in the mind, letting the body get still and peaceful. And then, like I earlier said, yoga is a state of samadhi, a deep state of meditation, where the illusion of an independent self becomes transparent or absent. So you're like, oh, I'm connected to everything. Like I'm in the trees, and I'm in the river, and I'm you, you are me. Like we're all connected. So this is just some like philosophy, kind of spiritual ideas. So a funny thing, one of my teachers says, this view can lead to a huge loss, net loss of suffering. So you become happier, blissful, equanimous, which means equal, happy state of mind, and more likely to have energy. If you are properly disciplined to live ethically, so the yamas and niyamas, master the habits of well-being, posture, breathing, mindfulness of sensation, one point of focus and meditation. So it's a little recap of the 8 limbs. And then some other definitions. We've already talked about this, but I think it's really helpful to learn to repeat, right? That's how we learn and really understand, is to constantly be repeating. Yoga is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, physically, emotionally, mentally, skillful participation and engagement, inquiry, and truth seeking. So seeing life clearly beyond the fears, fantasies, and distortions. So our yoga doesn't exist in a vacuum, meaning like we come to practice, we go to a studio and we do yoga and we read and we learn, and then we try to apply those to our relationships. So one of my teachers said, like, once you become a yoga teacher, you can't honk anymore. You can't have like road rage because, you know, you're trying to like be like peaceful and nonviolent and truthful. So that's how like yoga doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like if I'm practicing the principle of ahimsa, nonviolence, and then I like yell at my dog or like, yell at my boyfriend or like am mean to my friend or gossip. That's really like in conflict. We want to like really bring it into all aspects of our lives. And another teacher, Bernie Clark, says yoga is not so much what we practice, but how we practice. So we can like CrossFit in a yogic perspective, or like practice running or walking. We can do our yoga doing those things. So skillful participation. So yoga is about growing in awareness, learning about ourselves, noticing. Yoga is a collection of techniques that can help us feel more calm, see reality with more accuracy, foster healthier relationships, and work towards realizing our highest potential. Yoga is the union of body, mind, spirit to keep you on the path of your authentic self. So hopefully that gives kind of a nice broad overview of some definitions of what yoga is. And now I'll just talk a little bit more about the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras are kind of like the foremost texts in yoga philosophy. In your textbook, you have a translation of the Yoga Sutras. It starts on page 149, and the sutras are in like 4 chapters. The first chapter is the Samadhi Pada, the chapter on Samadhi or bliss or divine. And then there's other padas. But anyway, we've gone over the first 4 sutras a couple times, and I'll just share with you a couple of the other sutras that I think can be really applicable to our lives. And in ancient times, and like in India, it would be you would learn the sutras one-on-one with one teacher, and you would memorize them. And then you'd kind of create your own commentary and like almost write an essay on each sutra. There are 196 altogether. And what the sutras are, they're one sentences. They're called terse aphorisms, so a short statement that holds a universal truth or principle. So like one sutra, you could spend a whole year studying or a whole lifetime. And I think most yoga instructors or people who really like live the yogic lifestyle will really focus on a couple maybe, and then really make it personal. So one really popular yoga sutra, which could be like a good one to have be like your sutra, the one that you really focus on, is Yoga Sutra 1.33. So it's the 33rd sutra from the first chapter. So it says that the mind becomes quiet when it cultivates friendliness in the presence of happiness, active compassion in the presence of unhappiness, joy in the presence of virtue, and indifference towards error. So this talks about the 4 vrittis. The vrittis are like healing activities, the keys that unlock the door to peace of mind. And I'll just share what it says in your textbook, what Deskachar says. In daily life, we see people around who are happier than we are, people who are less happy. Some may be doing praiseworthy things and others causing problems. Whatever may be our usual attitude towards such people and their actions, if we can be pleased with others who are happier than ourselves, compassion towards those who are unhappy, joyful with those doing praiseworthy things, and remain undisturbed in the errors of others, our mind will be very tranquil. So I don't know about you, but have you ever seen someone like really succeed and you're just like, oh, I hate that person? You know, like anyone? Is that just me? Maybe you're like, maybe like I remember in high school there was this girl, Annie Nickman, and we were always like neck and neck, like for whatever reason, like we were both like she became the field hockey captain and I was like the co-captain, and like she got into like the choir for sophomore year and I didn't, and like she was the lead in the play our senior year. Like we were friends. She's a friend of mine, but like it always felt like she got everything I wanted and I was like just behind her. And if I like knew about this then, I might, and I remember like just like complaining to my parents, and they're like, oh, Annie, which looking back, I'm like, my parents probably shouldn't have said mean things about like another teenager, but they were just trying to make me feel better. But you know, if I look at this lens, I can think like, oh, I should be happy for people doing great things. Like in the presence of happiness, like cultivate friendliness, like delight. Like, wow, Annie like works a lot harder than I do and she gets these things. So You know, it can be true like with social media. You're like, oh, look at these people. I mean, maybe not right now, going on cool vacations and look at their perfect relationship. Like, why don't I have that? But what would it be like to like really get out of yourself and think like, oh, I'm really happy. Like other people being happy doesn't take away from my happiness. I can like think about those people kind of lifting up. And so the whole four healing virtues, the first one is karuna. Karuna means compassion. So active compassion in the presence of unhappiness. And then mudita, which means joy in the presence of virtue. So to take joy in the joy of others is to take joy in, I don't know why I can't read my own writing, is to share the richness of the world. So to take joy in other people's joy is to share the richness of the world. And this happens a lot in like a yoga practice. Is Ferris sleeping? Well, I guess he really needs it, so I'm just gonna let him sleep. So boring, sound asleep. He's right in front of me, he's sleeping, that's okay. So in yoga classes, like we will be doing an arm balance and then like I'll look over and be like, oh, Hannah's doing crow for the first time. Like maybe like Ferris hasn't done crow, but he doesn't have to be like, well, I can't do crow, and I can't. It's like cultivating like happiness, like, oh, look, that's great. Look how awesome. So that's like cultivating happiness towards, joy, friendliness, and then so mudita, joy, karuna, active compassion. And just in my notes, I say that to take joy in someone else's joy is a beautiful way to live, to see someone who inspires us, to see what's possible, like to stretch us. Like, oh, I can do that too. I can push myself harder. So dismantling this idea of a separate self, of finding unity where before there was only division. Softening the outer shell of the ego, the I, me, mine, and connecting to a sense of belonging. So you're all one. Like if I see someone really like succeeding, it's like I can like take part in that success too. So upeksha means indifference in the face of wicked, or indifference to error, neutrality, equanimity, to not get your feathers ruffled, not engaged, kind of, So sometimes we have to like grapple with the fact that sometimes there will never be a resolution. Like if you are in a relationship and you break up and it's like out of the blue and you never got like a why, or even like with friends, like sometimes friendships just dissolve and we don't have like a clear ending or resolution, or sometimes with jobs or whatever the case may be. So indifference in the face of the wicked. And that can be hard when you think about everything that's happening right now in like politics in our world. And I almost don't agree with this, because I think we can't just be indifferent. Like to be an anti-racist, we have to like not just be like, oh, I love people of all color, I'm colorblind, but to really like take an active step and actively participate towards a solution. So for me, I almost don't agree with it, but if we're going for like Patanjali's goal of like relaxation, peace of mind, samadhi, like indifference, kind of like putting up a wall or a shell and like not letting anything get through, like let it bounce off you, like slide out water, like water off a duck's back. And then the last vritti is Maitri, which means friendliness, being happy for others where they're happy. So this sutra number 33, places our relationships, the practice of yoga squarely in our relationships, in the context of human relationships. So this is like the test, the litmus test to the effectiveness of our practice, how we show up in relationship to others. There's a kind of yoga, it's called Ashtanga yoga. It's kind of where vinyasa flow, kind of the style of yoga I teach most, comes from in their series. There's like the first series, second series, and there's 6 series. And you have to like get the first series really perfect until you can go to the next. And like people in the Ashtanga community joke that like once you leave your yoga mat, that's like the 7th series. That's like the hardest of all. It's like, practicing yoga in your relationships. So that's the 33rd sutra. The mind becomes quiet when it cultivates friendliness in the presence of happiness, active compassion in the presence of unhappiness, joy in the presence of virtue, and indifference towards error. So if you're looking for like a good way to live your life, like a mantra and kind of principles, those are great principles. So that could be like your sutra for life. And it will probably take a lifetime to like have indifference towards error and happiness and all of that. So it's good to kind of work towards. So the next, and we're going to kind of hop around here. The next sutra is the 12th sutra, 1.12. And I'll just read it from your book. This is page 153 if anyone has their text. So it's, the Sanskrit is Abhyasa Vairagya Tannirodha, which means, and Desikachar says, how do we arrive at a state of yoga? What should we do and what should we not do? And it says the mind can reach the state of yoga through practice and detachment. So it's kind of this like opposite. It's like always surrender, but never let go. And practice is like that fire, that heat, that discipline. Come to your mat and work hard. And then detachment is like, and then surrender and let go. So say I'm like working towards handstand, like every day I'm trying to get handstand and I like really want to do it and I'm practicing. And then that's like the abhyasa, that fire, that discipline. And then the vairagya is like, you know what? Maybe my body's just not going to do handstand. And at some point I have to just let it go and think like, if I'm meant to do it, I'm going to do it. And like, I'm learning a lot on the journey, right? The journey is the destination. So we can apply that to like all of our like things we do in our lives, all of our activities. So, you know, schoolwork, you know, you like study really hard, you work really hard, and maybe you're someone like me that had to like work super hard in school, and then you still got like B's, and like maybe someone next to you, like I had a roommate who was just like super smart and would just like roll to class and like show up to exams and like cram and just like always get better grades than me, you know what I mean? So that's like the surrender and let go, like do your best and then like set it free. So that's the 12th sutra, surrender and detachment. So yeah, those are good kind of principles, like duality principles to think about. And then we'll do just one more sutra. This is the 16th sutra, 1.16. And it says that anything we get attached to will cause us to suffer because it's not going to last forever. So yoga is also very hand in hand with Buddhism. If you've ever studied Buddhism, non-attachment, suffering, the 8-limbed path of Buddhism, 8-fold path, the 8-limbed path of yoga. So in your textbook, it says, it is only when the correct practice is followed. Oh, that's the wrong one, sorry. So then the object is gradually understood fully. At first it is, no, that's still not the right one. This, I'll get it this time. 1.16, when an individual has achieved complete understanding of his true self, he will no longer be disturbed by the distracting influences within and around him. So detachment develops with self-understanding. The inevitable desires for diversion cannot be suppressed, or if they are, they will surely surface again later. So non-attachment is having no desire, which is very hard, right? Like how do we just like not desire things? And this is when we connect to the yogic spiritual principle of Purusha, which means the spiritual aspect of ourselves, the part of us that is eternal and divine. So Buddhism kind of teaches that like there's no like God separate, like pie in the sky, but like God is within us. Like everything is God, like this floor and this yoga mat and this computer. So that Purusha within ourselves, that divine light, is untouched by the world around us. There's a still point inside us, an inner strength that we can connect to whenever. And the more our attachment to things in the world will fall away, the more we connect to this eternal, divine, spiritual part of us. So the Buddha said that the secret to happiness is man's release from worldly ties. So we'll all die, and even the resistance to that can make us suffer. So anything that we get attached to will make us suffer. So maybe you're like really attached to like your looks or your body, and like that is like fleeting, right? Like we're all going to get older, hopefully, because that means we're like aging because we get the privilege to live. So like our youth or like our relationships, maybe you're like in a really serious relationship and then you get married and you have kids and you buy a house and you're super happy. And then you're like, oh, found out like your husband cheated on you, and like the suffering that might cause. So anything that we get really attached to will make us suffer. And so that's where, if you have a sense of like a belief in God or spirituality, you can think like, this relationship isn't mine. Like people are like, mine, that's my boyfriend, that's my husband, that's my girlfriend. But like no person is owned by another person. They're always themselves. There's like a point where you have to like let go, like release control. So relationships, and then of course like death, like people are so afraid to die. So even like living, we get attached to. So which like I'm very attached to my body and my life. I definitely want to keep living. I don't know about you guys. So that's like super normal, but where we can detach from, we might enjoy longer. Like people who, you know, are living like terrible qualities of life in their 80s, 90s, 100s, and they're just like, it's their time, but they're like holding on for dear life. That's where we can practice this sutra of like letting go. So then anything that we get attached to will cause us to suffer. So that is Yoga Sutra 1.16. And then I'll just share one more sutra, and then we'll move on, and that's the 14th sutra, 1.14. It says, it is only when the correct practice is followed for a long time, without interruptions, and with a quality of positive attitude and eagerness that it can succeed. Talks about our yoga practice, and it can also be applied to anything. Like, has anyone ever read Malcolm Gladwell? Like that 10,000 hours is what you need to be an expert at anything. Like practice, practice, practice. So with our yoga, we want the practice to be firmly grounded. So like a strong, steady practice, like an hour, 5, 6 times a week, every week, every day. And well attended for a long time. So not like a couple months, but like a year, 2 years consistently, so that if you don't do it, you're like, oh my God, I feel weird. I didn't do my yoga today. For a long time, and then without a break. So no misses, like every day, and then in all earnestness with like a real like fervor and like a passion almost. So Deskachar in your text says there will be a tendency to start practice with enthusiasm and energy and a desire for sudden results. Has anyone happened that? Like, you know, that meme that's like works out one day, looks for abs. Yeah, definitely. I've definitely been like, oh, am I like more toned? I had like one HIIT class. So by the continuing, and it takes anything like for real change and like for it to change into a habit, takes like 90 days, maybe like 6 months, solid year. So by the continuing pressures of everyday life and the enormous resistance of the mind encourages us to succumb to human weakness. All this is understandable, but we all have these tendencies. This sutra emphasizes the need to approach practice soberly with a positive, self-disciplined attitude with a long-term view towards eventual success. So we always want to have like enthusiasm and joy and happiness to what we're doing with our practice. So that's your little sutra breakdown for today. And then let's just go over, has anyone done the reading? You can be honest. Anyone? You have? Hannah M? Awesome. Is there anything you want to share that you like picked up on or enjoyed? I don't mean to put you on the spot. You don't have to, but.
I finished 2 of the 3 like sections we have to read. I still have one more though.
Did you like it? Did you think it was like boring or was it enjoyable? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, and it's just like a lot of the stuff that you've went over and talked about.
Sweet. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. And we're just gonna go over this document I posted on Moodle. So it's a little bit about the history of yoga. So I'm just gonna read. You can listen, you guys can look along. So in Yoga Sutra 1.2, which we just talked about, Patanjali provides his authoritative definition of yoga. Yoga is the cessation, the fluctuation of the mind. So these are kind of some reflective questions that you could maybe put in your mindfulness journal for today. How has COVID-19 and this time of social distancing impacted your mental state? Which yoga practice or life activities helped you to quiet your mind? So, and then we just kind of continue on to the definition of yoga. And in general, it was believed that the practice of yoga developed roughly 5,000 years ago. However, some research suggests that yoga may have be up to 10,000 years old. At any given moment in history, the word yoga has its own set of usages and associated meanings. What are we doing here this afternoon or this morning is simply adding our voices to an ongoing conversation that reaches back into early antiquity and will likely extend far into the future. So what exactly is yoga? What does that word mean? Which we've already kind of gone to. And this just goes to say, like, pre-Vedic yoga, the earliest historical artifacts we have identified the practice of yoga date back to sorry, this doesn't look right. So the Indus-Saraswati civilization between 3000 and 1900 BC. The Indus-Saraswati civilization was first discovered by archaeologists in the 1920s. At the excavation site of the Mohenjo-Daro and Harappas, soapstone seals were found engraved with figures seated in meditation-like postures. So the most famous of these is the Proto-Shiva seal, which features a man sitting in Mula Padasana root lock pose, a posture that today would be considered extremely advanced. So that's when you can like crisscross applesauce and put your feet over your thighs and kind of bring your hands between your legs and like lift up, and then maybe hands around. I'm not quite sure, but so yeah, this is just kind of a historical document about like yogic history. Yeah, and then it talks about all of the yogic texts. So the Rig Veda, the hymn of the root yuj. So what we were talking about, that root of the word yoga. Yeah, and then it continues. How long is this? Okay, so it's 14 pages. I think you guys can read it. Yoga in the Upanishads are another text. The Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, so just interesting, yeah, context, kind of like land the history of yoga. So we'll wrap it up here, and our last class is Thursday, and I'll post something either today or tomorrow with all of your final assignments. A couple of you have missed multiple classes, so if that's the case, you really need to be on YouTube, looking at those videos, watching the whole thing, participating, and then to make up, send me an email with the recap of that. So like a paragraph. And I can tell when you're just like, oh, yoga was good today. I felt like I opened my hips more. I enjoyed it. Or if you're like, oh, like I liked how in today's class you did like a meditation with the colors. I really liked the chakras you talked about. I felt myself going back to like the green color, or like I really liked the pigeon to head to knee pose transition. So I need like a little bit more specificity if you are making up classes. So I know you did the whole class. I can also see like on my YouTube analytics, like how many people viewed it and like how long they watched it. And I've also just, you know, putting these sutras to practice in my own life, learned that like some of you just like aren't gonna do the assignments and are just gonna like, I guess kind of essentially cheat and like say you did class or made up, or even like here you could have your camera off, and I'm just like, okay, like I don't care, that's like on you. Like you really are kind of just like cheating yourself, which is a bummer. I mean, like this is your education and you're paying probably a lot of money for it. So I want you to get the most out of it. So I'm trying to give you the most, and it's kind of like you can take it or you can like leave it, and like that will also reflect your grade. So pretty much everyone had a really good grade at midterm, but at this point, a lot of you, I feel like, have been just kind of doing the bare minimum. So this is like your come to Jesus moment where, you know, if you think you've missed, if you've missed more than 2 classes and you haven't emailed me about that, or maybe you have, I need like to hear from you, and I need, yeah, because you won't pass or you'll get like a C, and that's like a bummer. So like I said at the beginning of the semester, like you all have an A to start, and I want you to keep it. And I feel like it's hard to like not do well, but some of you still like aren't, because you just haven't been showing up or doing your little assignments. So make sure you make that up and get it in. You can all do really well if you just like put a little effort in. If you've been like slacking or missing, you can make it up, and now is your time. It's the last week. Okay, So with that, I'll let you go and I'll see you on Thursday. Bye, guys.